Episode 70. The heroes find out that there's an emerald on a craft, and Tails' so-called authority as captain is again ignored right away, as Sonic and Chris take the risk of going to the craft. Sonic says the craft is surrounded by the Metrics, and Sonic ricochets off a bunch of spaceships, and Chris shoots a missile. It'll always be stupid that Sonic has no problem being in the vacuum of space. Meanwhile, Cosmo offers Tails tea, and he talks about how he wants to do some engineering. And Cosmo is just totally lost when he starts talking to her about it. Fuck this ship, seriously. What were they thinking giving her these moments when they're trying to ship her with Tails? Is this what their entire marriage would be like? If so, he'd be better off with someone else. Can you imagine her going into engineering materials garage with him and him asking her which material he should buy? And she'd be like, duh, I don't know. Anyways, Tails wants to drag the craft out of a place, but can't. And it turns out it was Deca who was piloting that craft. When I saw him in that craft, I was wondering if he was a Metric's counterpart to him. But it's actually just Deca in a disguise. So why did he put on a disguise? Tails spots the Metrics in space, and Sonic says that Eggman's joined forces with the Metrics. And after all, he'd do anything to take over the universe. He expects a thank you for luring the heroes here, and the bad guy takes pride in not being grateful. This is why he sucks. Their forgettable, unlikable designs don't help either. They're just expressionless robots. Even Metal Sonic could have more expression than them. At least one of the Metrics shows gratitude for Eggman. But if Eggman was a competent villain, he would have destroyed that Metrix for gladly being ungrateful to him. That's what Robotnik would have done. And we see Bokoon and Eggman waste time cheering and boasting in the Eggmobile for too long to force comedy. Sonic says they're closing in, and Cream says they can't turn around, and if they don't, the spaceship will head straight into the black hole. Then Amy insults Tails for trying to come up with a team name, and at first I would have agreed since his name was Arrogant, but then she says that the whole tornado naming scheme is so cliche. I wanted to slap her for that. Where does she get off treating Tails like that? But somehow he still puts up with this bitch. There's no way to justify Amy being portrayed like this. She used to be a good character. I still hate that she's mistreating Knuckles, but to mistreat Tails? That's going too far. And Chris says that the Metrics are blasting their own fighter planes, causing Eggman to think they're going too far. Knuckles wants to retreat, and Cream says they can't turn back because they've gone too far. Tails wants to aim the cannon directly at the mothership. Why don't they just use that and nothing else, since the cannon always saves the day, aside from the fact that it takes so long to charge. But they could be doing the other pointless stuff that they do to deal with the villains while they're charging the cannon. Eggman puts up a shield when Sonic's trying to spin dash at his ship, and there's an explosion in the Master Emerald chamber. So that's when Knuckles has to get bandages on his chest. I heard about that. And Sonic's hurt too. This was impressively gutsy. I remember seeing these pictures before. But I'm guessing this is just gonna last one episode. I'd like that Tails was horrified though, since he blamed himself for Sonic getting hurt. Cream says they're in danger, and Chris isn't sure the spaceship could make it through another attack. Tails says he's not worthy to be captain, and takes off. He was lucky he was allowed to be it instead of Sonic being it for no reason. But ultimately, he's the smartest one, so he has to stay captain. Cosmo reassures Tails with a motivational speech that only he can be captain, reassuring him with a long, dragged-out speech that's really boring me because I know they're going to use this as an excuse to have him cheer up in just one scene. And he does. At least Tails feeling guilty is even more consequences to Sonic getting hurt, but if he's going to get over it that fast, then what's the point? We didn't need Cosmo to do this. Eggman taunts Chris about Sonic and Knuckles getting hurt, which is confusing since he insulted a Metrix for hurting Chris earlier, and he's bragging about getting Sonic actually injured. Tails wants to take a look at the data to see how they can beat the spaceship. He wants to reverse the direction of the spin to create a new magnetic field that's of the opposite polarity, and Chris says they need as much energy as possible. Tails says they need to use the ring tunnel, and Sonic insists on going even though he's still hurt and Amy's worried about him. Amy's only really worried about Sonic ever. So how could I buy her as a compassionate person in the show when she treats Knuckles and Tails like garbage? And the only time that she ever cared about anyone other than Sonic in the entire franchise, aside from Fleetway where she saved civilians, the only time she cared about someone other than Sonic was that one time in Sonic Adventure where she cared about one bird. And that's literally it. Sonic goes through the ring tunnel with his hover shoes, and the star shield deactivates, as I really wish this episode wasn't in such a fundamentally boring setting, as a literal void of nothingness in space. You couldn't get more empty and lifeless than space. They could be fighting in their spaceships up in the sky in Mobius and have the same plot. For no reason, Sonic passes out after breaking through and worries Chris. I'm more confused than worried, but this is tense. You know it's exceeding at the tension when it's still working even with artificial stakes where you know the heroes won't die. Amy says they're losing engine power, so Knuckles forces himself to walk to the Master Emerald. Again, I bet he and Sonic will magically be uninjured in the next episode, with no clear indication of how much time had passed. But it's still gutsy that they actually got hurt, but it doesn't matter if it's just for one episode anyways. The spaceship keeps going through some inexplicable darkness that I'm also confused by. And I'm glad Tails confirmed they did it since I was just confused. Then Tails apologizes to Knuckles and Sonic, who show him the respect that Amy never did for a saccharine happy ending. What a boring episode! You can't get much less interesting than space. The spaceship the heroes are on spends the whole time trying to struggle through a magnetic field, I guess? It doesn't get destroyed, and eventually Tails gets through it successfully. And all the while, Eggman is threatening them with the metric spaceships. But he'll never kill them, so whatever. You'd think that with the metric ships facing them the whole time, they would have just continuously fired missiles and lasers at the spaceship the whole time, until they were doomed, instead of whatever it was they thought was a better idea. Their force field can't hold for that long. But I guess the ships can only fire lasers for so long, for some reason. I guess the laser firing things would overheat. This was so boring. They didn't get a Chaos Emerald out of the deal, right? Didn't Tails think there was one on the spacecraft? So maybe they did get an emerald. But I don't think they did. I think they just escaped the danger. It was impressively gutsy and good for the tension that Knuckles and Sonic got injured. Sonic because in his aversion, him getting fired out of a cannon didn't guarantee he would win in one attack. Though if you knew it wasn't the end of the episode, and instead the middle, that would have been predictable anyways. And I'm sure Sonic and Knuckles will be fine the next episode with no hint of how much time passed for their injuries to heal. Which is not what I assumed would happen when I hadn't watched the show yet. So literally the only consequence to them getting hurt was that Tails had a pointless despair moment that he got talked out of in just one scene by Cosmo. And the heroes had to go take a nap for a while. Sure, they struggled to walk, but it'll just be really temporary anyways. The action scenes in Sonic would be more tense if the characters actually got injured on a regular basis. And you need tension to make an action series exciting. Being exciting and engaging is what Season 3 had to make it the best one. Because every season before is shockingly boring for a kids show. It's just that in an episode all about the heroes techno-babbling about spaceship fights, instead of being Sonic-like and fighting robots, I feel like the writers made them do this because they really wanted to write Star Trek episodes instead of writing Sonic stories. At which point you should probably get new, better writers instead of ones that are completely burnt out and exhausted of writing stuff that's Sonic-like. It turns out that they wanted to homage some sort of Japanese show instead. But whatever, it's Star Trek. Again, I can't blame them for wanting to spice things up after 2 entire seasons of them fighting Eggman with a giant Robot of the Week formula. It'd be impossible to take the show seriously for even one season if they spent all of Season 3 just fighting Eggman. The season's normally so much more engaging than the rest of the show that I want to recommend just watching this one and nothing else, because at least it doesn't take place on Earth. But it's not that much more interesting when it's just a generic stereotypical spaceship battle that could have no Sonic characters at all for all the differences making to the plot. Being derivative isn't unforgivable, since there's so many franchises that there's no such thing as a truly original idea anymore. It's impossible not to accidentally rip off something when writing stories. And sometimes things become cliches specifically because they're such great ideas that everyone wants to use them. So that's not unforgivable either. It's just that I'm not super interested in boring spaceship battles where most of the time the camera's focused on the characters' faces, giving me technobabble. I'm not a Star Trek fan, or Star Wars, whatever it's most similar to. So this isn't trying to appeal to Sonic fans. I was just waiting for it to end. There's no explosion sounds in space, by the way, so every time we hear them it's just unrealistic. So they really have got all the same problems as the genre they're ripping off. Was there any time in this episode where Amy hit something with a hammer, Sonic spin dashed something with actual success, like beat badniks and stuff, or Tails flew with his tails? No. So you could replace the entire cast with generic nobodies and have the same plot, and at that point, it's not Sonic.